Sehr gut, macht er also automatisch. Top.
Den Kürbis einmal was sagen.
Mal kurz drauf.
Test.
Ja, super.
Test.
Ja, eine Minute. Hello, hello. Welcome to this session on the Wednesday afternoon about agroforestry and agrobiodiversity. In the written program, Steff de Haan is written, but he unfortunately got sick. So I also take over this session. I also guide the poster sessions tomorrow. My name is Silke Stöber and I work at Humboldt University Berlin at the Center for Rural Development. And now I'm very happy to announce, Sarika Mitra from India, from Biodiversity International at CIAT. And she will give her presentation, show the title, and we're looking forward to a 10 minutes presentation with a 5 minutes discussion afterwards. Thank you very much. And the floor is yours.
Right. So good evening. I am Sarika Mitra from the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT. And I work out of the Delhi office in India. And I will be presenting some of the work that we are doing on mainstreaming agrobiodiversity for enhancing climate resilience, nutrition, and livelihoods. And in the next 10 minutes, I will give a short introduction about the Alliance and why we have focused on mainstreaming for smallholder farmers, especially in India, and what were the outcomes of the initiative that I'm talking about. Right, I'm not used to this, so excuse me. The Alliance is a part of the CGIAR and works to provide research-based food system solutions. We use partnerships, it's driven by impact, and we do provide a lot of capacity strengthening. We focus on multiple themes, as you can see there, including digital inclusion, agrobiodiversity, multifunctional landscapes, and we work in several countries, as you can see from the map. And the box in red is India, where I'm based, and the work that I'll be presenting. So India is rich in genetic resources and is one of the 12 mega biodiversity centers, has 3 of the hotspots. It also houses one of the largest ex situ collections of plant genetic resources in the National Bureau of Plant Genetic Resources, or NBPGR, as we call it. We all know this, agrobiodiversity contributes to multiple sustainability dimensions, and you would think with our richness in genetic resources, all would be very well. And yet, like the rest of the world, we do have the problems. And the most vulnerable population are the ones who are at most risk. For most of these, I'm not going to talk about all of them, but there were 3 themes that we really wanted to focus on. One was diets and nutrition, where there is a huge gap. One was climate change adaptation, which has not kept pace with what should be. And the other was obviously agrobiodiversity conservation, which is a requirement for everyone. All right. So who are the most vulnerable population in India? These are the small and marginal farmers. This is the big chunk of the rural population who are all farming as their primary occupation. And data shows that between 2010, 2011, and 2015-16, there has been an increase in the number of small and marginal farmers who actually, the definition is those that own 2 hectares of land or less. So there has been an increase in the number of farmers, that's like 1.7 million, And the farm size, the small farm size have increased while the larger farm sizes have decreased. So more farmers with less land, that's what it comes to. So within this scenario, the Alliance launched the initiative with funding from the UNEP-JEF. To mainstream the conservation and use of agrobiodiversity for resilient agriculture and sustainable production to improve livelihoods and access and benefit sharing capacity of farming communities across 4 agro-eco regions in India. And this included about 20 districts in 8 states of India. And we tested multiple varieties of 20 crops. And because most of you may not be familiar with these sites as I am, I've put up some pictures. And clockwise from top, you have Himachal and Tiri, that's up in the mountains in the Himalayas. And then you have Assam, it's famous for its tea. It's wet, it's very fertile. And then you have the central, Satna is in the central tribal region that's semi-arid and has a lot of economic backwardness. And the last one is Jodhpur, which is in the extreme western, northwestern region of India. It's pretty dry, as you can see from the photograph. So generally speaking, we used a general approach where we have, okay, that kind of went for it also. Okay, we had we did a survey of the genetic diversity. We selected some germplasm and varieties. We tested them in the fields, and then we added value chains so we could improve the livelihoods. And there were basically 5 steps. First was the baseline surveys for households and communities. And we had some interesting information. One, I've just put some up there. And of the 4 sites, the 4 agro-eco regions we had, only one was not, did not have more than 75% of the households below poverty line. Then we selected the germplasm based on local suitability. We conducted some climate suitability analysis to repatriate the germplasm from the NBPGR. And we had 2 kind of selection trials to find out farmer preferences and performance in the field. The first was the crowdsourcing trials, where you have a large farmer network and each farmer is provided with 3 varieties, hence tricot trials. But the trials are blind, so farmers do not know which variety they're testing until after the end of the trials. And the varieties are all sequentially balanced, so all the varieties are tested equally in the trials. Then we have the previous trials, the mother-baby trials, where all varieties are tested by the participants, and this is a bit more rigorous. And then at the end of the trials, you can have a selection of varieties that farmers like or have some good traits. And then you go on to the next season, you can include the varieties that have been selected, or you can reject them. So once you have selected the varieties, what then? Farmers need to have sustained access to the seeds. And I think a clock would have been easier. Okay, farmers would have, farmers need access to seeds. And we decided, because this is some work we've been doing for quite a while, even before the start of this initiative, to support and establish community seed banks. This is where farmers store their seeds and they can exchange their seeds. And we established 32 CSBs, which was within 11 seed networks. And seed networks included both farmer producer organizations and self-help groups, and the CSBs, of course. And finally, we developed value chains. This is basically where you have a product that is branded and then sold, so you can improve the livelihoods. We also did, beyond that, we also did nutritional profiling of more than 3,000 native varieties. And there were 2 things in this. One was to add the nutritional facts at the back of the products that they were selling then. And the other was to find out some interesting information. And this was done at the NBPGR, and we found some really, really interesting results. I've just put up one up there, or two. Pearl millet with low rancidity, that actually is important for the shelf life. And then we found rice varieties with low amylase content and high protein content. That really happens. And these were land races that we had actually tested in the field. I am going to skip the Moochwali Bajra, even though that's was quite interesting, because I do not have a lot of time. We had 23 startups and private companies linked to the farmer producer organizations. We did help the farmers brand, market, commercialize their products. And we found that 2 rice varieties were awarded the GI tag, and the sale and the price increased by 3 times after they obtained the GI tag. And the area under cultivation increased 3.5 times after they received the GI tag. And so, in conclusion, these are the 3 things we tried to do, and we were successful to a great extent. Improve access and availability, identify promising land races, and improve income and livelihoods. And all this work was possible with the help of the farming communities we worked with and our farmers, which I've listed here because they do deserve that recognition. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Sarika, for this very interesting presentation, and in time. It was perfect. I would like to ask you, now you have 5 minutes for question round, and here we have a microphone because we also have online participants. So please, if you have a question, you will get the mic. Yeah, and please also say your name before you raise the question to Sarika. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. My name is Klara Jakopekova. I'm a doctoral researcher from the University of Bonn. I'm just interested about the infrastructure that is available for the local farmers to sustain the seed banks. Is that like the cultural, traditional knowledge that is being used, or something modern that you have invested in? Thanks.
With the community seed banks, one of the things we always advise these farmer networks is to go with whatever they have handy, easy to procure, easy to maintain. Usually within a village, or if it serves more than one village, like 2 or 3 villages, it would be a room that is kind of donated for free use by some farmer, or it is actually a community room. Usually in Indian villages, you would find a structure like that where you have, weddings and functions and things like that, and farmers are free to use them. For the items, there were 2 or 3 things that we provided them apart from training. One was the drying beads, because that, especially in the very humid regions, this is a big concern. You're drying, but what you're storing for almost a year until the next season. That's the minimum time that you need to keep dry. And that doesn't happen with whatever, local methods they were using. So we provided them with the drying seeds and maybe drying beads and some dehumidified boxes. But other than that, it's always maybe, local stuff that they have, drums, or even the bookkeeping is very basic, because we do not want to bombard farmers and communities with too much technical information that then, people will not follow.
One more question, yeah, please. Last one.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Anton Kimaro. I work for C4 ICRAF as the scientist and country rep in Tanzania. I just want to ask a follow-up question on the mechanism for protecting the seeds in the community seed bank. One of the challenge for protecting indigenous seeds or seeds by community is inadequate regulatory framework to back up farmer efforts. And thank you that you are showing the power of market and GI that helps to provide incentives. But what is the space of regulatory framework in your area of work, and how does it help really to support farmer effort to protect indigenous seeds?
So everything we tested were land races. All the work that was done here, everything that all the data I have quoted here, these are all land races. In fact, since I didn't get the time and I have an opportunity, let me just go back to this. The three photographs on the lower right, this is very interesting. This is from the northwestern part where Moochwali Bajra. Bajra is actually pearl millets, and Moochwali directly translates to mustachioed. And this is a land race that used to be grown earlier in those regions, but farmers had stopped growing it after high-yielding varieties had come. And the second photograph that you see, the Moochwali Bajra actually has those sharp awns on the seeds that actually does not allow the birds to peck through, which is what happens. And if you see the rightmost picture, that's what happens with bird damage. The darker areas are where you actually have birds eating away at the yield. And we kind of reintroduced it back, and farmers are quite happy with it because, you know, in the long run, they are actually getting almost the same yield, if not more. In some cases, it has been more. So this is the indigenous seeds that we have brought back. The GI tag was also the same. Branding, I mean, from all the sides, because I did not have the time to go through these details, and this was a long project. We started in 2017. So we did find, like, up in the mountains, there was red rice, and then in the east, there was different varieties. India has so many varieties of rice. And then there was pearl millet. We worked with different kinds of pseudo cereals. So all the data that I have quoted here, and including the nutritional profiling of what we found, these are all land races.
Thank you so much, Sarika, for these insights to Indians' biodiversity and your very, very big, I think, project long-term. Very interesting. Thank you so much. And maybe after the session, there is more opportunity to exchange with her. Yeah, big clap hands for her. Nevertheless, due to time, I would like to move a little bit further east from India to Vietnam, and I welcome Hoa Do from the University of Bonn, and she will tell herself what is her presentation all about.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hoa Do from the University of Bonn. I'm presenting today our research on the adoption and potential development of agroforestry in Vietnam, picking on a farmer perspective. Our study area is located in the northwestern region of the country, where agriculture happens mostly on steep land with long periods monoculture of staple crop. This farming practice has reduced, caused the severe soil erosion and land degradation. Crop has failed to stay productive, and combined with the recent trend of extreme and unpredictable climate condition, the yield reduction has been exacerbated and threatened local livelihood. The location has been the focus of aircraft a research and development project where agroforestry has been introduced and promoted as the alternative farming practice to improve farm productivity and for soil conservation. Many research attempts has been directed to plot level experiment to investigate the many agronomic and environmental aspects of those systems. However, given the fixed design and the control condition of scientific experiment, they cannot easily be translated directly into farmer implementation, and the process may require an adoption mindset. And in fact, farmers have been adopted and managed agroforestry in very complex farming system where many activity co-involve and in relation to each other. And farmers often play a central role in conceptualizing, designing, and adapting agroforestry to a farm situation. So the attention is required on the dynamic connection between the farmer and the system context. So in this study, we try to assess agroforestry from a farmer point of view to better understand the challenges that they face when adopting agroforestry and how farmers manage to overcome those challenges. Since farmers are heterogeneous, so we try to break down the farming population into different point of view using Q methodology. In practical terms, we formulate a sample of statements that cover the topic on the farm level impact of agroforestry with the main regard to the perceived benefit and challenges of the practice. We then invited farmers to rank those statements over a fixed grid distribution grid from based on their psychological significance from agree to most agree to most disagree. And we use a factor analysis to extract the major viewpoint from 40 complete ranking sample. And you can see here this table summarizes the three major discourses extracted from the analysis according to the statement that they have more stronger view on. And you can see here there's the consensus and the different amongst those discourses. The discourse ones, they emphasize more on the benefit side of the agroforestry, and they believe that their household has been benefited from the adoption. Discourse 2 perceive benefit to some extent, but they also emphasize on the challenges. While discourse 3, they focus their view more on the challenges of the adoption. From Q method, we not only see the common and the different in the farmer perception, but we also capture the main challenges highlighted by farmer. So now we want to know what farmer have done to overcome those challenges. To answer to this question, we try to develop a mental model that describe the dynamic that shape farmer perception and also the rationale behind their management action. So we apply a system thinking approach through a series of discussion with three groups of farmers representing for 3 discourses in Q study. And for each group, we invited farmers to reflect on the dynamic or the changes that they observed or made on their farm since adopting agroforestry. Then we aggregate the mental model of the 3 discourses and generate a collective farm level interaction. And now let's look at the different part of the model. This is the starting point that initiates the chain that long-term periods of monoculture of maize associated with frequent soil disturbance led to soil erosion problem and depletion of soil fertility. Combining with climate change impact, it reduced maize yield dramatically. So farmers tend to reduce May area to avoid losses. And they reallocated land to sugarcane to sustain the cash flow. However, the high neighbor need for sugarcane prevent farmer from expanding sugarcane production area. Agroforestry is adopted, competing land resources with maize and sugarcane, and induce high adoption expand. As a strategy, farmers slow down the rate of adoption so that they can afford the adoption costs and still maintain the cash flow from the alternatives. Meanwhile, they take advantage of the side benefit from agroforestry to earn immediate income. For example, from intercropping product, from feed supply to sustain livestock production, and from the off-farm income due to a reduction in the neighbor need for the farm activities. So the direct benefit from fruit tree come and contribute into income after a time lag. But at this point, farm gate fruit price appear as the external factor that constrain farmer willingness to invest more in fruit tree and as well as the agroforestry area. So this is still remaining a structural barrier that farmer often have a little power to address and may need intervention at higher level. Farmer also perceive some environmental benefit, mainly through the increasing soil cover from tree canopy and witness soil disturbance, this reducing soil erosion. And this could build up the soil fertility and the chance that farmer will convert the agroforestry area back to conventional crop due to the better markets of those crops. So we have just looked at different parts of the model with many pieces of connection. If we put them all together, it's become a holistic story of a system that in which farmers try to coordinate different components and the interaction between the components to keep the system functioning under the changes and the interventions. To sum up, agroforestry has been enhanced the adaptive capacity of a farming system faced by climate change and land degradation. Farmers often draw on their understanding of interdependency among the farm component to optimize the synergy and trade-off when they adopt new farming practice or new component to their farm. Farm gate fruit price appear and remain as the structural barrier that farmer often our farmer control and need the high level intervention. And by considering farmer view and way of thinking, we can actually improve our intervention so that they will like customize the intervention to the unique farm situation. And by that, I conclude my talk, and yeah, happy to discuss and looking forward for comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Hoa, for this amazing in 10 minutes complexity, very structured, presented. I'm impressed. And I think there are questions. Yes, I see. And please again, say your name and.
Hi, my name is Athena Birkenberg from Hohenheim University, and I'm just interested in knowing more about, you said they perceived it as not being very labor intensive, which is very surprising to me. Maybe you can elaborate a bit on that, why? And also you said sugarcane is labor intensive, why they would even do like both. I understood that they would keep sugarcane as a cash flow income alternative.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's also surprising for us because normally what we think about agroforestry and the barrier of agroforestry is labor demanding, but I think it's different from perspective that labor demanding in agroforestry is because of you cannot mechanize, like you cannot use the machine in the system because it's complex and it's about machinery. But in our context, farmer, like, okay, they have an intercropping in agroforestry, and they found the reduction in labor in many different ways. Okay, like they can get the feed, I mean the fodder from agroforestry system, and they don't need to spend days to look for the fodder in the forest or in somewhere else to feed their livestock. And another aspect that the distribution of the labor over years is reduced, like it's less intense compared to conventional crop, because you will find the cluster need of labor in conventional crop at a specific point in time. But the farmers, they could, with agroforestry, they could spread the labor over the year, so make the work is less intense for them. So yeah.
Thank you. I think there was, before you, I think there was another hand in the back, or not? Otherwise, you can have, I would say, another question. And I just heard that the online participants do not see the screen, right? That is very unfortunate. I think our technical team has to fix it. Yeah, okay. Then you, please, again.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. You have mentioned the fruit price is one of the most challenges, and you have also mentioned in the beginning that cooperation among farmers somehow increase the benefits of market access. Do you have some examples how farmers could cooperate, and what, if you have any examples, of course? Thanks.
Yes, we do have example because there has been the developed farmer cooperative in the region, and by cooperatives they can pull in their products, because normally the traders, they only have a contract with the one can provide like reliable products. So the small farmer cannot make it, so they need cooperate to pull in the product and to supply to the trader. So that's why they can secure a fair price. Otherwise, they need to go to the market to sell them little by little, and it's very unstable price. So farmer cooperative is the one way, but we also discuss in our paper, is upcoming paper, that yeah, the development of farmer cooperative also need great attention from the government, because there have been many failures from the effort to trying to form cooperative, because farmers are not a business skill, and also the trust among farmers is not very high. So we should consider all of them. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Hoa, for, I think we got new insights, at least me, from Vietnam on agroforestry. It was really interesting. A big clap again to you. Really good. Our third speaker is actually an online participant. It's Constant Yves Adou Yao from Côte d'Ivoire, from the Université Félix Houphouët-Boigny. Of course, he will speak English. No? Constant, I hope. I mean, we can see your screen, and we will now invite you to the hall to present your study. And I will also, please stick to the time of 10 minutes. I can't show you my cards, but maybe I will interfere if it's getting too long. Thank you. Constant, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
I hear you.
C'est à vous.
Do you hear me?
Well, very well. Merci. Yeah, you can start. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer for the opportunity they gave to me to present our work here. This work is about the diversification in cocoa agroforestry system and his effect or impact on food security. We use 2 case studies from Côte d'Ivoire, from Central and Southeastern Côte d'Ivoire. Then I try to pass the slide.
Yeah, you can go to the presentation mode if you,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Perfect.
We will do our presentation like as mentioned by this outline. Côte d'Ivoire, as the first world leading cocoa producer, is subjected to several illegal human activities that are seriously damaging its biodiversity. The country's position is largely due to the promotion of shade-free production systems, which are virtually wiped out traditional agroforestry systems. Today, with the increasing scarcity of forest land and evidence of seasonal variability, these unshaded systems are showing the limitation and raising questions about their sustainability. The strong demand for cocoa beans has led the popularization of certain agroforestry systems that are more sustainable and contribute to the food security of households. Our work here has the main objective to understand the role of the system, this cocoa agroforestry system, in the life of the household in 2 areas of Côte d'Ivoire, of course. And specifically, we aim to determine the diversification species that are kept in the agroforestry systems. Also to assess the floristic diversity, 3 species mainly, on these systems, and to identify the uses of plants that are kept in the farm by farmers. We work, as I mentioned, in 2 areas, one in red, Agoville, in the southeastern part of the country, covered by evergreen forest, and another in blue, Kokumbo area, in the center of the country, covered by forest savanna transition zone. Then in these areas, we apply 2 methodologies, one about ethnobotanic and socioeconomical survey. Yes, that in this part, what is very important here to show is the use of the carry consolidate approach to reporting food security indicators of a World Food Program that we use to try to see if the species that are kept in or introduced in the farm can contribute to the food security of the household. Then we made also some botanical inventories in plots of 25 by 25. We made 52 plots in the center and 50 plots in the southeast. All individual, about 2.5 centimeters were measured, recorded, and also identified in those farms. Then after the analysis that concern richness and composition, we try to see the species that are common between the 2 areas, one in the forest, the evergreen forest, and the other in the, let's say, forest savanna zone. After the analysis, what is important to notice here is that all the farms, all the systems are really diverse. For example, we recorded 154 plant species associated with cocoa trees in both areas. Of course, in the evergreen area, we found more species, 113, while in the central zone, we find just 50 plant species that are kept in the farms. For example, in the central part of the country, we see that for diversification, farmers use sometimes some crops like cashew or coffee to intercrop them into the coffee to be able to cultivate this the cocoa in that area, and also to let the regeneration of all cocoa farm to come out. Both area
There are
presented.
5 minutes left, Constant.
Okay,
We are
no
we are
problem.
listening.
No problem.
Okay.
27 plant species are common to both areas, forest area and also forest savanna area. Among them, we notice here that farmers use several plants to for the diversification of a system. For example, here you can see the Guinea pepper. Here that is avocado here, palm oil here. But in the other side, they use also some non-woody plant species like papaya, like plantain, like a sweet banana, like taro, and so on. There are many, many of them that they use for the diversification of a system. They put those species in the farm in one way to enhance the diversity in the farm, but also to enhance or to have another source of income in the farm. Then after we try to see the use of those species, local population use plants associated with cocoa trees in 6 main categories. Medicinal use constitutes in the southeast zone the main one, with 56% cited by farmers, while in the center of the country, the most used is food category. Most of people in the center, they use those species in the cocoa agroforestry system because they are going to use the fruit for their own consumption or to sell for food. Then after 5
3 minutes.
Okay, 5 functions are identified for those species. In general, species are associated with coffee in the center and also in the eastern for shade. And some other trees, as I mentioned some minutes ago, are for consumption or for sale, that in food uses. After using the carry method, we can say that in the center of the country, 88% of the households interviewed were food secure. That is composed by 60% food security and 28% that are in mid-food security. But the 2 other categories are in food insecurity. Here, this work allowed us to notice that the cocoa agroforestry system play a key role in life of the rural household in Côte d'Ivoire in the 2 areas we work. They are home a high diversity of plants that provide a variety of services to population that's contributing to household food security. This diversity of sources of income increases with the diversification of the system and contributed to the well-being of producers, hence the need to promote agroforestry in the current context of climate change and the food security of vulnerable households. Thank you very much for your attention.
So you can hear a lot of people clapping. I don't know if you heard that. Can you please stop the presentation?
Yes.
Sharing, so we can maybe see you if you have the video.
Yeah, of course.
Would be nice to see your face for a moment if you have enough.
Wait a minute. They say that I need the permission of the organizer.
Oh, okay. Maybe in the hall are some questions to this cocoa in agroforestry in Côte d'Ivoire, then please raise your hands. People are discussing, I think there are. Oh. Please say also your name, that Constant knows with whom we will talk.
Yeah, I want to find out, you said that there's biodiversity destruction. So I know like in Ghana, one of the things causing biodiversity destruction in the cocoa sector is illegal mining, what we call small scale mining. So in Côte d'Ivoire, what is causing that, the biodiversity destruction in Côte d'Ivoire? Then I'll also be grateful if you could tell me like the average yield per output of a farmer as per your survey result. Thank you.
Okay. Can I answer?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah, for biodiversity destruction, I think we have the same problem. We have the same problem. For example, in the center where we work some 5 years ago, today when we reach the place, farmers, some of them are cutting the cocoa trees, the cocoa systems to mine because there are illegal mining operation in those areas. So I think Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana, because I know also the situation in Ghana, I used to work in the Western Ghana, I know it is the same problem. Mining, illegal mining, illegal other activities that can, it is a big challenges. It is a big challenges that are facing cocoa sectors in Côte d'Ivoire. And for the yield, you know, we are several scale of yield. When you are, for example, in the southeast, I think people are around 300 and 400 kilogram per hectare. But for example, where we are in the west, the new belt of the cocoa, people can go through 600 to 800 by hectare. In the center, for example, in the central part, people are around 250 and 300 kilogram per hectare. But what is important, sometimes they gain, their income are higher than the people from, for example, in the southeastern, because of the added species like plantain, like avocado, like pineapple, like orange, etc., etc. So this is what I can say about the biodiversity destruction and also about the yield of cocoa in those areas.
Thank you. I think there are, I don't know who was first. I didn't see, did you see it?
No,
Can we have, well, give him first and then maybe if you answer then short, we can have 2 more questions. Constant, no? First, the question will come.
Okay, thank you. I'm Anthony Kimaro, C4E Craft, working in agroforest. My question is on the concept of diversity and the diversification. I wasn't clear how the two you handled with respect to variables and indicators you presented.
Mm-hmm.
And the second follow-up is that there are many of other biodiversity indicators in the cocoa landscapes, including insect, birds, and the others, but you focused on the food and other aspect. Maybe you could also let us capture whether the scope was to link with only food or the ecosystem functions in general. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think for biodiversity indicators, yes, here I focus on plant species, so on food and also tree species that are not food. But of course, in our team, some of my assistants of my student work with soil diversity, work with insects, and so on. We are taking all those aspects, all those indicators into account. Here, the presentation was just on plant species and food species. Diversity and diversification for us, diversity can concern, for example, native tree species or even exotic or planty species that can concern agrobiodiversity. But when we are talking about diversification, we are trying to see, apart from the cocoa and the indigenous trees, what people are bringing more in the farm to try to have more income, to have more food, and etc. So this is why we made the difference between diversity and diversification. Diversification is the way to do it. So, and diversity is what we find in the place. This is how we use the two terms in this study.
Thank you. So the final question from the backside.
Thank you so much for the very interesting presentation. And I would like to ask, I think it's directly adding to that, how did the farmers choose the different species? Because you mentioned this very high diversity, and how was the choice making? What were the motivations and factors?
Okay. To choose a species, as I said, the farmers based on the function of the species. Some, if they need some, for example, a species for shade, they know how to use it. And if they want to have more money, or they want to have food in the field, they know also. But in background, for example, for farmers from the southeast, and also for some of the in the central part, there are some agencies, some NGOs behind. Sometimes they go and they train the farmers. But there are also some farmers that are not in cooperative. They just bring out what they learn from the parent, for the father, the mother, etc., etc. So this is how they do. And to get sometimes seedling or seed, some of them go through the forest, because it's very expensive for them to buy, for example, seedling or seed from some agencies. If you have an NGO that can help you, that is not a problem. Otherwise, they try to do what we call in French, system D. Yeah, we just try to do how we can to survive. This is the system.
Thank you, Constant, for giving us such a rich insight into the rich biodiversity and knowledge in.
Unfortunately, you didn't see me.
Unfortunately,
you didn't see me.
What did she say?
I say, unfortunately, you didn't see me.
That is really unfortunate. We would have loved to see you. So I invite you to find your budget next time for next year to come to Vienna, and we will get more stories about cocoa in Côte d'Ivoire.
Okay.
And you can even bring some cocoa that we can test.
Okay.
And now you get another applause from us, from the hall. And say goodbye to you, or you can stay, of course, because now we stay in Africa, and Sophie Jago from the RBGQ, which is a Royal Botanical Garden, right, in the UK. She will give us interesting insights about another country in Africa.
So I'm Sophie Jago. I'm a researcher at the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, and I work closely with a team of partners from both Addis Ababa and Mizantepe universities in Ethiopia, and also from the Alliance of Biodiversity International in SIAT. So we work alongside communities of smallholder subsistence farmers on a project to develop an incentive mechanism for the conservation of rare agrobiodiversity in Ethiopia. So firstly, why is this important? We are all very aware of wild biodiversity loss, and as a global community have developed many policies and tools to help us tackle this crisis. However, we have put considerably less effort into addressing global crop diversity declines, and this is despite agrobiodiversity being the subset of biodiversity most important to human survival. Currently, we only consider 417 of the 7,039 edible plant species as food crops, and 90% of our global calorific intake comes from just 15 crops. This low dietary diversity means that our global food systems are vulnerable to shocks. In order to create a more sustainable future with increased resilience to shocks, improved food security, and increased adaptability to changing conditions, we need to conserve our agrobiodiversity. And we need to do this in situ and alongside associated traditional knowledge for how to grow and process it. There are only a few places in the world still with intact indigenous food systems, Ethiopia being one of these. And these highlight important areas for considering implementing schemes for in situ agrobiodiversity conservation. So currently, much of the costs associated with maintaining agrobiodiversity fall onto the shoulders of smallholder subsistence farmers who maintain crop genetic diversity on farm and in an ad hoc manner based on their private preferences. In our project, we're aiming to distribute the costs and benefits of conserving agrobiodiversity more fairly by implementing a scheme called Payments for Agrobiodiversity Conservation Services, or PACS. PACS compensate smallholder farmers for the opportunity costs that they incur through maintaining rare crop varieties. PACS has already been implemented in over 150 communities and has been demonstrated to help achieve both cost-effective and equitable agrobiodiversity conservation. As a concept, PACS is very similar to the more well-known Payments for Ecosystem Services, which is a sector with a yearly value of between $36 and $43 billion. This highlights the potential PACS has as a tool for funding agrobiodiversity conservation. So we're implementing a PACS project in Ethiopia, which is a hotspot for both wild and agrobiodiversity, but is also one of the most food insecure countries globally. In our project, we're focusing on the conservation of a nationally important crop for Ethiopia called enset. Enset has a range which extends all the way down to South Africa, but it has only ever been domesticated in southwest Ethiopia, where it is known locally as the tree against hunger. This is due to its drought-resistant qualities and its ability to act as a store of food and to be harvested at any time of year, making it a buffer for food insecurity. PACS. So in Ethiopia, enset is a staple food to over 20 million people. It is characterized by hundreds of unique land races, which offer different qualities, whether that be the taste of different food products, drought resistance, disease resistance, or even medicinal properties. To conserve this landrace diversity, we're working with communities around Kaffa Biosphere Reserve, as this is an area where enset production is particularly important for local livelihoods. So how do we know which of these landraces are rare and in need of conservation effort? We identify the conservation target by incorporating the knowledge of local communities to classify each of the enset landraces grown in the area into a rarity category, similar to those used in the Red List. To do this, we implement an approach called a forced cell analysis, where a focus group discussion is carried out with a farming community who asked to list all of the land races that they grow or know of, and then as a group determine whether each of these are grown by many or few farmers in the community and in large or small quantities. Each landrace is then placed into the relevant box and given a rarity score for that community. Here, knowledge from elderly farmers played a particularly important role in helping to identify landraces which had been lost over time. We repeated this four-cell process for all of the communities participating in the project and overall surveyed 22 communities consisting of over 500 farmers, 35% of which were female. Through this, we were able to identify 175 unique NSET landraces. And using the 4-cell data, we calculated an average rarity score for each landrace. Here we show the spread of rarity across landraces separately for 2 locations, Mizan and Bonga, as the landraces identified in these 2 areas differed. However, in both areas, you can see the largest proportion of landraces fell into the endangered category, with a total of 59 of the 175 landraces being endangered. We decided to focus our conservation efforts on these, but first needed to work out how many we could conserve within our budget. So this brings us on to the next phase of the project, which was to implement a competitive tender process to assess the level of reward farmers were willing to accept for providing a conservation service and growing these rare landraces on their farms. So these rare landraces may hold important genetic diversity for future adaptation, but they're not necessarily the best adapted or most useful under present-day conditions. Growing them therefore comes at an opportunity cost to the farmer, as they take up effort and space which could otherwise be used to grow a currently more useful landrace. So we held workshops with community leaders to explain the process of a competitive tender. This is where each community puts in a bid offer, stating which of the rare landraces and how many of each they're willing to conserve on their farms and what level of compensation they require for doing so. The workshop was used to demonstrate to farmers that if they put in an extremely high compensation price, they would be unlikely to be selected to participate. However, if they put in an extremely low compensation price, they may not be adequately covering their opportunity costs and may lose out compared to other participating communities. The point of this was to encourage community leaders to think about their community's specific opportunity costs and desire to participate, and therefore to put in bid offers which accurately reflected this. As a whole, the competitive tender process was used to find cost-effective conservation solutions in a fair, transparent, and equitable manner. All 22 communities chose to submit bid offers in the competitive tender process. All 22 communities chose to submit bid offers in the competitive tender process, and we received offers for 52 of the 59 rare landraces. The average compensation price per plant across all of these offers was £2.16. However, this did vary between different communities and different landraces, likely due to differences in community level opportunity costs and in perceived use value of different landraces. For example, the most expensive landrace to conserve was Epo. Epo is wild NSET. It holds significant genetic diversity, but is bitter tasting and not used for food. This therefore lowers its use value for farmers and increases the opportunity cost for them to grow it on their farms. So once we had all of these offers, we needed to work out which ones should be selected to participate. To do this, we used a linear programming model to identify the most cost-effective bids so that we conserved as many of the rare landraces as possible while remaining within budget and also trying to maximize the number of communities participating. Using this process, we selected offers from 15 communities, comprising of 7,927 individual plants, spread across 44 of the rare landraces. The average compensation price after this selection was reduced to just 87 pence, suggesting the competitive tender process provided a useful method for determining cost-effective conservation solutions. Next, we needed to implement the conservation action. And to do this, we started by providing the communities with the corms of their chosen landraces to grow. Here you can see one of our project participants preparing the corms. We will then be carrying out monitoring checks to check that the communities are growing the agreed upon landraces. And once the corms have formed suckers, shown in the bottom left, and these have been separated into individual plants, shown in the bottom right, we'll be providing the agreed upon compensation. So the high interest in this project from local communities and its resemblance to the $36 billion payments for ecosystem services industry highlights the potential of upscaling packs across crops and locations and delivering outputs relevant to both global biodiversity framework targets and sustainable development goals. This can be done through the in-situ conservation of rare agrobiodiversity, contributions to food security and poverty, and maintenance of traditional land management practices. It also offers a unique opportunity to increase biodiversity finance through collaboration between conservation and agricultural sectors. So a main question which remains with PACS is how we can sustainably upscale the scheme, which is something I can discuss further with anyone who's interested. So I'd just like to end by saying a quick thank you to my collaborators and funders. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Sophie. It was amazing for me. I learned also a lot. A nice mix of methods and from participatory to very economic modeling. I'm sure there are many questions to her, to you. Yeah. Please also mention your name and please.
David Baxter from Helvetas Intercorporation. First of congratulations, really interesting and I think perfect for such a short presentation. You summarized it very well. When you're saying you're finding a way of scaling, sustainable upscaling, so what is the bottleneck or the biggest challenge you encounter in attempting to do so?
So there's quite a few challenges. So there isn't really a red list of agrobiodiversity and land races. So we don't necessarily know which ones are rare or endangered. So currently when you're implementing PACS, you have to start from the bottom and find out which land races are endangered before you can even start implementing the project. Also, it's important that the compensation is based on a specific community's opportunity cost, because if you you can't really work out a compensation that's fair for everyone, as a different farmer might have a different value. But one of the biggest challenges is how to fund these schemes. Currently, PACS is mostly funded through research grants. So it would be how you upscale that to something similar to payments for ecosystem services. This could be through developing value chains for these crops. So in Peru, they've done this with quinoa, and they've brought rare varieties of quinoa into kind of governmental food systems like schools and prisons to develop a market for them. And then you could also potentially, with redirection of subsidies within the agricultural sector, fund PAC schemes that way.
Okay, thank you. I'm Tokubana Antoinette. I will ask you if the producers will receive the payment by ecosystemic, by which mechanism they will receive this in your context?
So the compensation is done in an in-kind payment. So the communities in the competitive tender will outline the price in monetary terms of the compensation, and then they'll outline what they would want that money to be spent on. So some might say they want shovels, or some might say they want school books. So it can be anything that they choose. We had some that wanted mattresses, some that wanted water pumps. And so it's all done in in-kind payments rather than in cash payments.
Thank you so much. My name is Mohammed Shafiullah. I'm from Hochschule Rheinwald. It's really nice that you've applied these concepts from economics. From my perspective, I could be wrong, no? But I'm thinking out loud here. From my perspective, it's basically a Dutch auction approach when it comes to willingness to accept. So my question is, you use the linear programming approach, right? But remember, when it comes to economics and we talk about the income and consumption curves, right? Where's the concept of marginality?
So I'm not an economist.
I understand. Like when it comes to an approach, suppose if you ask me how much I'm willing to pay, at a minimum level, I can express that I want to pay this much. At a higher level, then someone might be willing to pay even more. Now, were these aspects investigated? Because when it comes to a linear approach, you consider someone with a minimum income the same, as to my willingness to probably accept. No? So this is something that maybe you could probably see in the future. No? So it's yeah, go ahead.
So I'm not sure if I'm definitely answering your question,
okay.
here, but
Go ahead.
when we did the competitive tender workshops, we would basically set up a scenario where we had different people having hats and having t-shirts and asking them what they would sell us the hat or the t-shirt for. And then we would line them up in order of who charged the most. And in a first scenario, we would say, okay, I can only afford to buy this many, so I'm only selecting the cheapest 3. And then we would say, okay, well, actually, I want to make sure I have at least 1 hat and 1 t-shirt. So then we're going to miss out the second most cheapest and get the third most because that one was a hat, for example.
Can I ask another sub question?
Yeah.
In this case, okay. My question is that in that case, suppose when it comes to willingness to accept, right? How do you test this truth telling? I'm pretty sure you probably have some, really good estimations, but this responsiveness that, hey, I'm willing to accept this amount of money. Now, how can you test this? Do you test this truth telling aspect? Because responsiveness biasness, right? Response biasness is always there.
Yes.
So was there some way you did that? It's okay if you didn't.
No, we didn't test truth. We basically explained that we wouldn't necessarily be selecting offers. We would be selecting cost-effective offers, but we also wanted to maximize other things. So we might not have selected a cheaper offer if it meant we could conserve an extra landrace for doing a slightly more expensive offer. And we also wanted to maximize community participation because there's not only a difference in willingness to accept in terms of the different land races, but also in the community specific opportunity costs.
Okay. Thank you for your cards for answering my questions.
Thank you, Sophie. It, I think, was very, very interesting. Very, I think, also full of courage or courage, and for me, a very new approach, competitive leader to use this competitive, how you called it, tender process. And I would like now to come to our last presentation for today, last but not least, with Klara Jakibekova. Thank you. From the University of Bonn also. And we go to, I think, your home country, I assume. And you will say back to Asia or Europe, Asia. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wanted to present a part of my doctoral research that I'm currently running at the University of Bonn Center for Development Research in cooperation with the Hochschule Rhein-Waal. I'm analyzing the socio-ecological impact of the non-timber forest product certification on the example of Kızılıngur village in Kyrgyzstan. And this presentation will be more focusing on the contribution of certification of non-timber forest products to the local livelihoods. Just briefly, I wanted to introduce the area of my research. So Kyrgyzstan is located in Central Asia, bordering with China, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. And the walnut fruit forests are located in the southern part of the country, as can be shown here on the map. And those forests are located on the mountainous areas between 820 or 100 meters above the sea level, and considered one of the important biodiversity hotspots in the world, because those forests are the largest widely growing walnut forests available currently, and the average area of those forests is about 47,000 hectares. According to the available studies, the approximate age of those wildly growing walnut forests is about 2,000 years old, and most probably they are, according to this research, of human origin, and most probably they were planted by human in ancient time, and then spontaneously they were growing in the wild conditions. Since then, currently the forests are stately owned, and the local communities are renting and leasing the areas for average area of forest plot of 3 to 5 hectares for the period of 5 to 50 years, depending on the leasing contract. It is also important to understand the historical background of land tenure within the walnut fruit forest. So previously, Kyrgyzstan was part of the Soviet Union, and the forests were publicly owned and under the Soviet Union management. And the first part of the 20th century are characterized by extensive logging and decrease of the walnut fruit forest areas. In the second part of the 20th century, the forest policy were focused on conservation of those areas. And since the breakup of the Soviet Union in 1991, the Kyrgyz Republic has gained its independence. And regarding the walnut fruit forest and the forestry in the country overall, unfortunately, that is has gone under high uncertainty, as it's the centrally planned subsidization system has been collapsed. And since then, there were a number of different forest management reforms and policies run, like community-based forest management, and a number of different donor funded projects and pilot projects focusing on possible innovations in order to improve the situation in the forest, to resolve the problem of forest reduction and biodiversity loss. So such innovations like agroforestry practices, or analyzing the forest certification and non-timber forest product certification practices like fair trade and forest stewardship council certification as examples. Coming to the global experience, of course, there is no one single and specific solution to resolve all of this question, and it's important to consider the local context and find the locally suitable solution to the issues of forest degradation and biodiversity loss. And coming to the commercialization of non-timber forest products, it also has a lot of trade-offs, social, economic, and ecological trade-offs which need to be tackled. And coming to the existing research in Kyrgyzstan, of course, mainly studies were focusing either on the ecological or socioeconomic aspects, and still it's important to have a more holistic approach and understand the socio-ecological complexity, including and considering the local context as well. Just also a brief information about the value chain existing in the walnut market, walnut value chain in Kyrgyzstan. Mainly the walnuts are being collected by the local farmers and local families on the rented and leased land plots from the government, and they are being sold either directly to the local markets or via the middlemen that they're coming and taking the products from homes, and they're being further sold on the local markets or being processed locally, either by the families themselves or by the processing plants there, and being then sold further on the local markets or being exported to other countries. So as I've mentioned, so this is the business as usual scenario when the local farmers collecting and processing and selling them. Of course, there are a number of difficulties that the farmers consider. So in selling, for example, the walnuts, it's a question of food security, food safety standards, and limited control of cleaning and processing facilities. And sometimes children also might be involved excessively in the collection. And having such issues in mind, there were different kind of innovations, specifically the certification programs implemented as a pilot projects, for example, the fair trade certification by GIZ, or the Forest Stewardship Council certification. Both have different perspectives, either focusing on the child labor and the other ones on the ecological perspective. So those are two examples that I've studied as an example. Were only the pilot studies implemented only on the limited area of lands, and there was a socioeconomic survey that has been held among 500 households, and semi-structured interviews. And what was important for me to understand what kind of households to characterize those households, and based on the cluster analysis, two-step classification of clusters, it was interesting to see three main types of households, mainly becoming income from different sources. The first group of households are the unemployed households, highly dependent on the forest. The second is a very active entrepreneurs breeding livestock, and the third group is the farmers mainly depending on the employment. And we can also see the income sources that, as I mentioned, the unemployed groups are highly dependent and becoming higher share of income from the forest, and compared to, for example, other active entrepreneurs, they are more focused on the business, tourism, and livestock production. I've also used the case of the fair trade certification that has been held in 2017 to understand how could it be, how could it impact economically, financially to the households. And we can see here on the graph 3 different household groups that I have identified, and the comparison of an average gross margin of a household compared as business as usual, and the case of the certification that they obtained in 2017. Of course, we can see that the income from certification case is of course higher, because the certification provided them slightly higher price, market price for the walnuts in this case. And it's also interesting to see other non-timber forest products involved in the households, but not involved in the calculations. This was only the walnuts, but farmers also practiced the collection of wild apples, wild berries, mushrooms, and other medical herbs. So this was the first part of my research. I'm trying to understand what kind of households are living in those areas, and how differently they utilize the forest resources. And based on this information, it's further than important to understand what could be the ecological impact of the non-timber forest product certification in those areas. As I mentioned, 3 groups that were identified: the more families that are unemployed, and very active entrepreneur groups, and average families that are being impacted on a different levels. So I think that's the main conclusions that I have received, and I will be glad to discuss it further. Thank you.
Thank you, Clara. Let's see if I think we got good insight to the walnut value chain in Kyrgyzstan. Please, questions? Yeah. Please also mention your name again. You know, but still. The others maybe not.
Matthias Becker from the University of Bonn. Clara, thank you very much. I'm happy that you are starting this work now. It's great. Now, my family-in-law, they are producing walnuts in France. And the biggest money earner is actually value addition on farm for making oil. So you press the oil of the walnut and you sell the oil. It's much higher value than just selling the nuts. Is this an option for Kyrgyzstan?
Thank you. Thank you for your question. And I'm really glad to see Professor Becker. Oil is not yet a very popular option, but there are already some projects looking into, for example, this research is part of the SUFA chain project that is being run by the Hochschule Rhein-Waal. And the project looks into diverse options that could be done, including the oil, if I'm not mistaken. But it's still on the initial phases. It's not being run on a commercial basis. But thank you.
Hello. My name is Bernd Müller. I'm from the University of Applied Science Weinstefan-Triesdorf. Thank you for your presentation. I have a question with regard to the certificated and not certificated farms, and you have showed us the data that they have the fair trade certificated farms generate higher incomes. Why? And the certification process ended in 2017. And my question is, why are not moving more of the farmers to the fair trade certification process? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for your question. It's a really good question. It's only a financial assessment that I have done on the example of 2017. This was the last case, because of the COVID, of the coronavirus, and of course there are a number of challenges that local people encounter. First of all, the walnut harvest occurs only each 4 or 5 years, so it's not stable. That makes it difficult to find stable customers who can they sell to, and also it's a collective action. Local people have to collect funds to pay for the certification audits and issue of the certification itself. It's a number of challenges with marketing, of course, but this is what our farmers struggling with and trying to.
Thanks, but your data was not from 2022. It's all from 2017.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I used the information from the farmers and then theoretically applied the prices and the information from the people who reported to get the certification in 2017. Of course, again, it's a theoretical assessment.
Thank you very much. My name is Emil. I'm also from Kyrgyzstan. My first question was exactly the same, so why it wasn't continued. But as I understood, you are still conducting this study, yeah? Nowadays, do you consider the existing certifications? Because I have been there recently. There are organic certified, for example, households. And do you study them?
Yes, I included this as well. What is interesting that it's a very opportunistic what farmers are doing in the area. So it's not only fair trade. Since 2018, they applied for organic as well. It depends which certification Oregon could provide a customer or could reply to their requirements, and that's why it's always different. It's either fair trade one year and then the next time is organic. It's a big instability in this case, but I will include them as well, right?
Okay, thank you very much. Another last question. I saw that you use drones for imaging. How did you use them? Could you please just a couple of sentences?
Yes, I tried to make image capturing of the households, and this is what I'm using for further analysis. It's called the asset-based analysis. So I'm using the housing parameters, the type of roofing or available area of the plot, and different parameters that can be analyzed by drone footage.
Yeah, very interesting. But is it legal?
Sorry?
Is it legal? I mean, do you consider the legality?
I've checked this. Unfortunately, there are no specific regulations regarding this in Kyrgyzstan. So that's the reason why it's, of course, it's been conducted by the agreement of the local leaders.
Yeah, and how do you differentiate? Yeah, for example, you see there is a bunch of houses that you can see. So how do you identify, for example, this house is more expensive, another one is like, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's visually identifiable, of course, and I've also
thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, please. There's one more question.
I will keep it short. Hi Clara, thank you for your presentation. My name is Philipp Schenning, also from Hochschule Rhein-Waal. My question is regarding certification. Do you think certification can contribute to the preservation of the forests? As you showed that the tenants do not care much in maintaining or planting new trees. They are just harvesting and not doing anything good for the forest. Do you think certification can contribute to it?
Yeah, that's actually one of my research questions, but I think there are a lot of opportunities and options provided by the certification. And of course, there are a lot of skepticism among the local people and in the government, among the experts. But this important step that is currently being done, it's being institutionalized. So there are specific initiatives and government strategies are now focusing on non-timber forest forest product certification. I cannot say that it's a solution and it will go and save everything, but it's still, I think it's a very important step towards implementing it, you know, on a more serious way. Thanks.
I think we should wrap up for today. We thank Clara again and give a clap hand. I hope you got good insight from these 5 presentations, reaching from the community seed banks presented by Sarika from India with a very big, huge project, mainstreaming native agrobiodiversity, and I think with a quite high impact, but of course also with a big funder behind. We have heard Hoa Do from Vietnam with a very interesting trying to this complex, very fuzzy reality of farmers in a very structured way by applying 2 interesting methods. Thank you. Then we had Constant from Côte d'Ivoire with giving us insight into this rich biodiversity and also rich indigenous knowledge or traditional knowledge from the farmers in Côte d'Ivoire. We learned from Sophie Jago, I think, quite interesting new methods, combining participation and also, economic analysis and, and the payment of agrobiodiversity, the PES, but as a PAX service. No? And I would like to mention also that BMZ is tomorrow also presenting their view, the German Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. I think she speaks to the payment of ecosystem services. It's high on the agenda. Maybe you can listen and get something for upscaling your idea. And finally, Clara from the Kyrgyzstan and the walnut value chain, very interesting. And sorry, the last question, she's now leaving. Maybe you ask directly to Clara. And with this, I would like to invite you tomorrow for the poster session at 8:30 in the seminar room. There will be 9 posters and another 9 posters presented on agroecology, agroforestry and agrobiodiversity in the second poster session. So 18 posters in all. Thank you for your interest. Have a nice evening.